Welcome back to Sports Psych, everybody. This is episode 8 of Sports Psych with Dr. Dre. I'm honored to have D'Jenne Egharevba with me as my next guest. D'Jenne is an athletic therapist with the Ole Miss Athletic Department and a former professional collegiate track and field athlete. She's a graduate of Texas Tech University, where she was a 2-time All-American for the Red Raiders. Before attending Texas Tech, she attended Illinois State, where she earned accolades such as Missouri Valley Conference Outdoor Freshman of the Year, Missouri Valley Conference Indoor Track and Field Championships Most Valuable Athlete, all conference honors in the outdoor 4x1 meter relay, and she was the first Redbird woman to break the 24-second barrier in the indoor 200 meters. D'Jenne is from Chicago, where she attended Naperville Central High School. And in high school, she was a 4-time varsity letter winner, a 4-time state qualifier, a 4-time all-conference honoree, a 4-time conference champion, 2-time High Point Award recipient, and 2-time MVP in track and field. She was also a 3-time All-Academic honoree and an Academic Championship honoree, in addition to running cross country and playing basketball. I am out of breath from saying all of your accolades, and that wasn't even half of them. It was a plethora, though, so I was like, let me pick and choose some. So clearly you are a very well-accomplished person.
Thanks. You got them all. You really got the big ones.
I was like, let me do my research. Let me get on the computer and edit and whatnot.
Wow. Impressive. I'm impressed. It's crazy listening back to everything. Oh my gosh. So long ago.
Well, definitely excited. I think you're clearly one of the most accomplished people that I've had on this so far. So I'm definitely excited to have you on. And so to get started, could you say a little bit about your introduction just into sports as a whole, like when you were younger?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, really young, I did gymnastics, ballet. That didn't last too long after that. And then I didn't get into sports until seventh grade. And that's when I started with basketball. I actually ran track a little bit and I absolutely despised it. It was not fun. I was like, oh my gosh, people do this? Not for me. So from there, I just like stuck with basketball. Freshman year in high school, that's when I got reintroduced to track. It was still a little bit challenging. We didn't have an indoor track, so we were running in the hallways and stuff. But that's when I really started to like improve athletically and starting to get recognized by the track coach. I remember it was the first track meet. I just bought some random Nike shoes from a random store. No spikes, no nothing. And he pulls me after the race and he was just like, you need spikes ASAP. I was like, oh, okay, fine. That sounds good. But at first I was not very involved in sports. So my parents are very much immigrant parents. They're very much focused on education. So I wanted to try soccer. I wanted to try this. I wanted to try that. Not really an option. So I had to wait until school kind of provided that stuff for me. Like it was part of like their programs and whatnot. And from there, again, high school started to progress a little bit. And I found a club coach as well. So he helped me start actually prepping for the collegiate world. And that's kind of where everything just really started taking off. I didn't think I was going to excel as much as I did until my coach pulled me aside that one day. It was just like, you need a pair of spikes. So
Okay. Because I was thinking as a question, like, what was that moment you realized, like, oh no, I'm good at this, and then like, wait, actually, I'm kind of cold at this. Like, what was
yeah.
that moment that it finally hit you?
Yeah, honestly, I do think it was after that, my very, very first track meet, because the way they lined it up was like the fastest people ran the first couple heats. And then I think everybody else ran afterwards. I was in heat 25. I was like second to last heat, like no one paid attention. And I won by at least 40 meters on an indoor 200 track. So that's when I was just
Wow.
like,
Like,
okay,
what's it taking everybody so
nice.
long? Hurry
Yeah.
up.
It was kind of cool. Also a little bit scary because I had no training. I was just I was just running to run. So that was, yeah, I think that was the moment. And then 2 weeks later, they immediately put me on varsity. And then, like you said, I think that was the moment where I was just like, oh my gosh, I think I just unlocked something within myself.
Okay, okay, that's dope. And so you said that at first you were like, "Hey, I don't know about this in seventh grade." I guess what changed? Because I feel
Hmm.
like with runners, I feel like it's people that they have a certain mindset where it's like they really enjoy it. Like for me, I'm like everything hurts when I'm running. I was
Yeah.
like, why do people do, especially distance? Like I don't have the mental fortitude for distance, but like yeah.
Mhm.
So what kind of clicked for you to be like, oh, okay, actually, I'm really enjoying this. It's not as bad as it was in seventh grade.
Yeah, I think it's because I actually had a choice in what I got to run. So middle school, they like pretty much forced us to run 400.
Okay.
I was like, that was not fun. And to this day, I'm like, ugh, I don't know about the 400. But yeah, when we started doing like short sprint stuff, I was like, ooh, I like this. I like the speedy stuff. And prior to the season, to indoor track season, my basketball coaches were just like, we talked to the track coach for you. He's expecting you. Because that was the year they gave me the Blink award because they made a joke that like she's so fast that in a blink of an eye, she's like down the court. So that was kind of how I got reintroduced to enjoying running. Because basketball was like obviously down and backs as fast as you can. And then I was just like, okay, well, let's see if we can do this a little further, a little longer.
Okay. And you mentioned that you have immigrant parents, and so academics was a big thing.
Hmm.
When it started to become clear that, well, one, academics is already on point from clearly the accolades that you have, but that also athletics is something that can open up a lot of doors for you in terms of academics as well.
Hmm.
Did that change anything in terms of the buy-in for them?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. At that point, when they started seeing the amount of scholarships that were pouring in, they were like, "Oh, we'll drive you. We'll take you to, we'll take you to go to your visits and stuff." So they definitely had a change of heart afterwards for that when they started seeing the amount of pull that I was getting from these universities.
Okay, okay. And then can you say a little bit about what your recruiting process was like?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So, funny thing, I may have been fast for my high school in the district at that time. Not very fast in the other states, especially the southern states. So, I was actually only getting recruited for the first half of my junior year. I was only getting recruited by D3 schools, handful of D2. And it wasn't until the summer of my senior year that I got my first D1 offer. I was like, oh my gosh. It was like I think like a NAIA school in Ohio. I believe it was in Ohio, but mainly only getting recruited by D2 schools. I was actually about to commit to a D2 school. I was debating between the D2 and Illinois State between then. So that was definitely a really hard decision to make. I was so scared. And obviously, you see all the college kids, like, or the high school kids my age getting recruited, Georgia, Texas, USC. So it was a little bit like, oh my gosh, like, what's going to happen if I go to a smaller D1 school and stuff? But it was very interesting, super, super humbling. I enjoyed the process. I absolutely love going to go see campuses, talking to coaches, talking to the athletes and stuff. I had so much fun. I really did. And when I ended up getting more in contact with Illinois State, I went on a visit, talked to coach there, absolutely fell in love with everything about the school, the program, what they had to offer and stuff. And something was just like pulling me towards there. So it was an experience. I really had fun doing it, getting recruited. Like that was a moment.
Okay. When you think about it, what was the factors that were the most important to you when choosing to go to Illinois State?
Yeah, how well I got along with my coach. So all the coaches that I've had, my club coach and my high school coach, they were very, very big prominent figures in my life. And I felt comfortable enough to talk to them about anything, everything related to track, not related to track. So that connection with my coach was always extremely important. The other thing was the progression of their team. Like they won conference that year. So I was just like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm also adding value to the team. So a team that's already progressing and heading in the right direction. That was something that I really wanted to be a part of. Um, what else? Those were like kind of the two main ones. Like I wanted to make sure that I had a really good connection with the coach. It was a program that was
Hmm.
kind of like on the upcome. And I'm trying to think if I met any of the girls then. But I guess for the standpoint of my parents' scholarship, they wanted to make sure that I was getting
Hmm.
some type of offer and a program that I really wanted to study in. So,
Okay, okay. And then what was the transition like for you as both a student and as an athlete from high school to college, or Coolidge, as I like to
ooh,
call it?
yeah, Coolidge. Transition was it was interesting. I actually had so much fun. I thought college
Mhm.
was my freshman year was the best thing ever, ever. Met so many people that look like myself. I met other people who were
Mhm.
faster than me. Built a lot of cool relationships. I think the toughest transition was the academics part because it was so rigorous and you had to study and study and study and study and everything. But I thought it was a pretty smooth transition for myself personally. I think, yeah, I'm trying to think track wise. Um, that was a little bit tough because I probably went to the weight room in high school, maybe a handful of times, and now you're coming in here and they're expecting you to lift your body weight and bench press it and throw stuff over your head. So I think that was the first time I experienced what waking up with like 50 pounds of sandbags on you feels like. It
Mhm.
was so rough. Workouts were really, really tough too. Super, super tough. But um the transition itself, like running at those meets, literally felt like I was back in high school. So that it was kind of like a nostalgic feeling.
Okay, okay. And so one of the things I did mention when going over your accolades was that you graduated from Texas Tech. So clearly you decided to transfer. Can you share a little bit about what
Mhm.
was it that made you decide to go ahead and transfer? And did you go through the transfer portal or was that not yet a thing for you at the
That
time?
wasn't a thing yet.
Okay.
So transfer portal wasn't a thing, but the main reason I transferred is because my coach left. So
Hmm.
he ended up leaving. He got a better position. Shout out to Coach E. And I was actually blocked from my head coach to follow him. So I wasn't allowed to
Oh.
go. So that's like when coaches were allowed to block you from going to specific schools and stuff. So I just decided to take that risk and transfer. So I did ended up getting a couple offers from a few schools. Took a visit at Texas Tech, met with Coach Rob, and I was like, this place is absolutely stunning. And as you know, Tech had just recently built their indoor facility. So it was
Mhm.
only a year old. One of, I guess at that time, it was one of the fastest in the countries. And then obviously other people started building and stuff. But fell in love. I got a full ride there, everything
Mhm.
paid for, which is a blessing in itself. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how I ended up at Tech.
Okay, okay. Now I know with football, like there is like the FBS and the FCS. With that being said, I know that even though it's like there's just one level D1 for other sports, like the Power Five versus the non-Power Five and whatnot, like there still is a difference in terms of the athletes at times and the facilities. And so you mentioned that, you know, the athletes in the South are kind of a little bit something else when it comes to track and field. What
hmm
was it like for you to transfer there as both a student as an athlete and then be able to keep up with them and let alone stand out
hmm
because clearly Not once, but two-time All-American.
So it's funny that you mentioned that because when I was at Illinois State, I was nationally ranked for a little bit.
Mhm.
So went to regionals my freshman and my sophomore years. So I was already racing the same time as the girls from down south. So pretty similar
Mhm.
times. And then when I got there, same thing. I was excelling a little bit more than I thought I was going to. So that kind of helped like reduce a little bit of the fear. I think I was more so
Mhm.
nervous about the workouts. Nothing could have prepared me for Texas Tech's workouts at all, at all. But wait, what was your question? Can you repeat it?
Yeah, just what the transition was like from
Mhm.
as a student and as an athlete, going, especially
Mhm.
not only going to Texas Tech, but also going to that more kind of elite level, if you will, of track and field.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. It was definitely a little bit of a rough transition because that was the first time I left also my family. And I was like
Mhm.
so nervous, like moving like down south. I didn't know like what to expect. Academically, that was probably the best I've ever done. I was totally fine with it. I was like excelling, figuring out what I wanted to do. Athletically was a little bit more challenging when it did come to workouts and fitting
Mhm.
in and kind of making a good impression and just performing at the standard that I wanted to. That itself was really, really tough. And it took me almost until the end of my first season there to really fully
Mhm.
grasp the concept that, oh my God, I'm here. Like I'm at a bigger school. There's bigger competitions. Like we're versing a lot of fast people. But for me to still be able to keep up with them and the bigger schools that were coming, I was like, okay, it's not that bad.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. And so, uh, you mentioned that, there was this kind of moment, kind of similar, where it's like, okay, like I'm doing my thing here. Like, it sounds like you got real
Mhm.
comfortable and then leaned in. But with the workouts, though, what was it
Mhm.
that was like, well, like, hold on now, like y'all doing things a little bit different here.
Literally, I remember one workout. This was my first year that I got there. Soccer fields during the fall. So we had a 800-meter timed warm up,
Hmm.
dynamic warm up, and then you either had to walk, drive, or run to the soccer field, which was like half a mile away. And then we would do more dynamic stretches when we got there. And then soccer fields, they would set out cones, and you'd have to do a 90-second run 4 or 5 times, and you have to hit that specific cone. That was the hardest workout to this day. And I thought Coach E's workouts were tough at Illinois State, but this was very humbling because I have no endurance, not a single endurance bone in my body. So those really humbled me a lot. Um, Weight room also beat me up real good. Coach Kitley always said he wanted to have the strongest
Hmm.
team in the country. So we were squatting like crazy. My max was 385. And some of my other teammates were pushing 600 pounds. And I'm itty bitty. So that was a lot. So it
I, I,
really was.
I was like, did she say three, 385?
I think it was for like one rep. But I was like knees shaking and everything.
Yeah. No,
And so
it's again, it's crazy. Like having been in athletics in different ways, and I was a volunteer strength coach at one point. Just to see
mhm.
like some people you would never expect, be like, wait, hold on, they just did that. Like, it's just such an
Yeah.
exciting feeling. So I gotta ask, like, when you hit that 385, and you said your knees were shaking, but you got it up, and then you rocked it. What went through your mind?
Mhm. I was like, I think I'm done. I was like, I think this is as far as I could go. But I was like, I don't think I realized how strong I was until like a year
Hmm.
or so later. I was like, I cannot believe I was like moving that amount of weight. like given like my stature and everything. So it felt good afterwards, but in the moment I was like, mm-mm.
Can you give a little context to your stature if you don't mind?
Yeah, so I'm like 5'8", very, very tall, lanky. I'm all legs. Like my torso is probably like that long. Um, yeah, I've just always been very tall and very lean, like athletic built. And when people look at me, they're like, "Oh, 800 cross country." I'm like, "No, 100, 200." So it was always like the same reaction when they actually saw that I was running because when you see short sprinters, you know that they're short sprinters. And I was definitely the oddball out in that sense. So
Okay,
again, like
okay.
being able to lift the amount of weight that I was lifting, given that I do look very small like a cross country runner, was kind of shocking.
Again, like I said, it always amazes me just the different things that I see people like do, and then
Mhm.
what I think I love about doing the work that we do is like we see all these little accomplishments, and then how much it shifts a person's confidence. Like
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's like they just like buy in so much more and more into believing that they can do pretty much anything. And it's like
Mhm.
just to watch them become like fearless in a lot of ways. Like even if they always been like pretty solid as an athlete, still it's like little things that they didn't know that they could do. And so just what was it like for you to just continue just to see so much progression in so many different ways?
I think the best part of being an athlete is watching you go from preseason weight and stamina and weight room progress to in season. I think the progress is probably like the best part of being an athlete and just being so thankful that your body's able to carry that load and that weight, no matter like how tired you are after doing a workout. It's just actually amazing how strong like human bodies are. Like there's really no human limit to what we can do. So it just made me like feel a little bit more thankful for the body that I have and like my ability to do that stuff.
Okay. And then one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned like, you know, indoor season, outdoor season,
Hmm.
what, because I would assume in high school you probably didn't do a lot of indoor running necessarily. But when you go to college and you're doing that, like what was that difference like for you of like running indoors versus running outdoors and whatnot?
Yeah, so thankfully we were able to run some indoor meets. We just never did it on a bank track. So my very first bank track was in my freshman year of college, and I again got humbled very, very quickly. But feeling that it just feels the best way I can describe it is like letting your wings like fully fly and like expand out, letting your wings like spread essentially. Because indoor track, sometimes you feel so like constricted and you feel like you can go faster. And then when you step outdoors, then it's like your full potential is unleashed. So it's such a good feeling when you transition and you actually see like the progress like being made in that aspect too. So the really funny thing about, not really funny, but Illinois State, most of our indoor track competitions were also flat track. So 300-meter flat tracks. And again, my first experience on a bank track consistently was at Texas Tech. And my first videos were, you could tell I have not done that before. So it was, it was interesting.
Can you describe the difference between a flat track and the bank track and just what it's like running on that for the people that have never seen or done it before?
Yeah, the best way I can describe it is like running down a hill uncontrollably and then trying to go up a hill and then down a hill again uncontrollably. It's such a this is the bank track that I was talking about. It's a really cool feeling until you're trying to set up your blocks and you're in lane 6 and you're literally leaning all the way to the left. And when a flat track is essentially the closest thing that you can kind of get to run in on an outdoor track, it's flat. there's no elevation, there's not a lot of bounce and not a lot of give back. So after running on a bank track for so long, transitioning back to running on a flat track felt like I was like running through molasses. So it's really interesting how like your body can adjust to running on such like a uneven slope and then go back to running on something flat. It's like really, really challenging for some reason. But the best way I can describe running on a bank track is like uncontrollable and then up a hill and then uncontrollable again. It's a lot of
Okay.
work.
I can imagine because I'm just like you said, even just starting the lane, I feel like I would be so discombobulated by that of like, okay, hold on, let me get like, just get everything set up nice and comfortable. Yeah, I think it'd
Yeah.
be like, it would throw me off a lot mentally.
Oh, it definitely threw me off because it got to the point where I was trying so hard to control the way that I run so I wouldn't go like run
Mm-hmm.
uncontrollably down the hill that I would slow myself going up the bank and then that would throw me off trying to pick momentum back up. Hmm.
Okay, okay. And that kind of gets into another question, and this part I can always edit out if I need to or whatnot.
Okay.
We can feel skip it, I guess. Uh, then the next question I wanted to ask you was, what would you say was the most challenging or difficult thing that you experienced as an athlete at any point in your life?
Hmm. That's such a good question. There have been so many low moments in my athletic career. I do think the most challenging thing that I had to deal with was probably oh, there's just so many. Wow. But I do think my performance anxiety was probably the most
Mm-hmm.
challenging thing that I had to deal with. And feeling like just exhausted because resting heart rate was probably like a 59.
Mm-hmm.
Performance anxiety heart rate was like at a 111, and that wasn't warming up. That was just sitting down, just
Mm-hmm.
constantly waiting and worrying and stuff. So having that before trying to compete is absolutely exhausting. It's so tiring. And then having your heart rate be even more elevated and then trying to calm it back down. There was
Mm-hmm.
something about the afterwards that I just could not wait to experience
Mm-hmm.
after training because then I was like, okay, now my full body can relax. I do think the other really challenging part of being an athlete during that time was when I transferred, I wasn't progressing. That was the first time that I actually felt very slow. My times weren't adding up. Practice wasn't really working out for me. I was having a hard time trying to fit in and stuff. So it was almost like I couldn't accept that situation. I couldn't accept that scenario. And I was constantly asking myself, like, what's wrong with me? Like, is my body changing? Like, what's going on? And stuff like that. And it got to the point where I was just genuinely not happy with track at all. That was a really, really challenging time. Um, but obviously progressed and just made it through the end of the season, and did my best to have a really good time, enjoy the moments that I had left with the team and stuff. But I do think those were probably the two most challenging things that I had to experience.
Okay. And again, with whatever you're comfortable sharing, I guess, what were you attributing those challenges to? What was it that was making it difficult to get along or kind of, I guess, feel like you belong with your, I don't know if it was your teammates or classmates or whoever, but what was making you feel like you
Hmm.
didn't quite have that sense of belonging and connection?
Um, so I'm an introvert and I'm very shy. So when I first got there, shyness and quietness was probably perceived as a bad thing, as something negative. So it did make it a little bit harder to try and open up without having preconceived notions about me. Um, that part was just like a little bit tough. I did eventually like make like really a couple of like close friends and stuff. But then again, team atmosphere sometimes can be a little tough and challenging to be around with a lot of people when, people don't get along. There's a lot of negativity and stuff like that. So I think that also played a big impact on me feeling connected and a part of the team.
What helped you cope with that other than, of course, deciding to transfer? But while you're in the throes of it, what were the things that helped you cope with that?
Okay, so this was actually at Texas Tech, the way I was feeling.
Oh,
So
oh, okay. Thank you for
yeah, so
clarifying.
feeling
So,
my,
how did you cope with
yeah,
that then at Texas Tech? Yeah.
yes. That is a good question. Was I even coping? I Well, I had a relationship at that time that did make things a little
Mm-hmm.
bit easier for me. Then I actually sought out therapy. I was like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
handling things the way that I need to. I got deeper in my faith and started praying like a lot more and stuff. So going to therapy definitely did help a lot. And it kind of shifted my perspective instead of seeing this as like a glass half empty, it was more so a glass half full. There's an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people don't get. This is something that I've always wanted. I wanted to run at like a powerful school, and
Mm-hmm.
have that recognition and stuff. And it wasn't maybe until fall of my senior year, like fall before COVID, that I was just like, what am I doing? I was like, I have been complaining. I've been just so upset. I've been looking at everything that's going wrong instead of recognizing like I'm doing what I love and competing against some of the most amazing people, and I'm highlighting everything that isn't working for me. So I kind of had to shift my perspective a little bit
Mm-hmm.
to recognize this is actually super fun. This is actually something that I've been wanting to do. This is something that I've been praying about and stuff. So trying to find the joy in the chaos, in those little
Mm-hmm.
moments and stuff. Very, very tough, especially when I wasn't running fast. I wasn't qualifying like I used to. So
Did Texas Tech have sports site services set up at that time, like available for student athletes?
yeah, yeah. So they definitely did.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Tyler Bradstreet, he was the head sports
Mm-hmm.
psychologist at the time, and they had interns as well. I do
Mm-hmm.
remember I saw one intern one time, but I just didn't, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't feel, it just didn't click. I don't know.
Ain't nothing wrong with it. I tell my clients, like, look, I think I'm great at my job and I ain't for everybody, and that's okay. It ain't about
Yeah.
me. It's about you to get what you need, and having to like encourage them to advocate for themselves. I think
Hmm.
that's the best thing to do. And it can be hard because, sometimes we want to take care of people's feelings. I'm like, hey, it's about the fit is so important. And so, I'm like,
Yes.
I don't take it personal. Like, I know
Hmm.
I've told that to people, and then they're like, no, it's fine. And they go to like the front desk person and be like, can I get every person everything? And so then I just laugh about it, and they'll see me, they'll be like, and I'm like, no, you're fine. I was like, I told you it was okay. Like, I want you to get what you need
Hmm.
out of this process. And if it's not a good fit, we're both going to be working harder than what we need to for you to get
Hmm.
what you need. So the fact that, you're able to advocate for yourself and do that, I think is huge.
Yeah.
And so now my brain wants to go five different directions, but I'm trying to stay
Yeah.
linear. ADHD
Okay.
people, my brain wants to go everywhere. So I'm going to ask about your transition from
Mhm.
college to professionally competing. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so again, I feel like my whole athletic career was definitely challenging. So when I first got into post-collegiate track, I just got into my master's program, or my
Mm-hmm.
second year of my master's program. So at that time, I was staying at a couple friends' houses just so I can go and train. And then I was driving 5 hours every week to go to class. So my training was in Dallas, and then my class was in
Mm-hmm.
Lubbock. So I would drive to Lubbock, same day after practice, and then come back, finish my training for the week, and then do it all over again the following week. So it was just extremely tough. It was really, really exhausting, but I loved every second of being with my post-collegiate, my club coach, essentially. So
Hmm.
Coach Dabbs, love you. I always say he's my Texas dad because all my family is in a different state. Literally
Hmm.
staying with a friend just so I can train and be with this person. Um, and I think that's when I re-fell in love with track was my post-collegiate experience trying to run professionally and stuff. I think there was a lot of things that I did not know about running post-collegiately that I expected. You see all these
Hmm.
people getting signed with Nike, Adidas, all of these brands and stuff, but it takes a lot. And even some of the people with the fastest times still are unsponsored. One of the biggest things that I
Hmm.
learned with trying to go professional as a track athlete is that it costs a lot. It is expensive. And without those brands constantly flying you out, that's something that's going to come out of your pocket. But having to find a job also as well that's going to provide and pay for the bills and practice and coaches and gas, all of that stuff.
Hmm.
It's crazy how running shouldn't be that expensive, but it is. Paying for meets, paying for
Hmm.
food, hotels to stay and run at those meets. There were a couple people that I heard were trying to go pro, run professional, and they were sleeping in their car just so they can like fulfill their dreams. So there was a lot of stuff that a lot of unforeseen circumstances that I was definitely not prepared for and probably should have done a little bit more research before
Hmm.
I went professionally. But overall, it was a really, really great experience. I loved my teammates. I loved my coach. I loved everything about it. And ended like again, like I said, I ended up falling in love with it all over again. It did get kind of bad towards the end of my first season just because I was so burnt out from traveling 5 hours every single week, driving, flying, and then practicing, and then dealing with injury and trying to pay for that. So I always think of like my circumstance as like my athletic post collegiate circumstance as like an unfulfilled what is the theory? Maslow's hierarchy of need.
Hmm.
I couldn't be like my highest self because my literally my basic needs were not being met
Hmm.
from housing to food. So that was definitely that definitely added to the struggle, relationship stuff as well too. Just completely burnt out. I had nothing left towards the end of the season, emotion wise, physicality wise. It was rough. It was a lot of this. Definitely a lot of that.
And so that brings up that the kind of question earlier, what helped you cope with all, because I'm even just the school part of it, I'm like, oh no,
Mhm.
I don't think I could do it. Let alone the 5 hour drive, like each week, like going,
Yeah.
yeah. So like, what helped you be able to cope with that?
I would definitely say prayer. Prayer
Hmm.
and like the faith that I had towards God. That was something that I had to constantly put first because I could not handle it. So I had to make sure that I was praying and taking care of my body, making sure that I was putting all the good nutrients in that I needed. I was always taking daily walks, like with my dog. I was always outside. So making sure that I was getting fresh air. That was the time that I joined my sorority as well. So making sure that I was spending time with them and like cultivating these friendships as well too and sisterhood. So that having an outside life
Hmm.
outside of track and school definitely helped me cope, I think.
Can you talk about, I guess, your transition out of competing professionally, unless you still are competing professionally? I'm not sure.
Mm-mm. No, I've hung up the spikes a little bit ago. I think
Hmm.
that transition was extremely difficult because at that time I just wasn't sure if I wanted to come back yet. I was like
Hmm.
mentally, I just was not in a good space to go back and compete and execute the way that I want to and give 100% effort. That was also a very, very rough time in my life. But I decided I was like, I'm going to focus on school. I'm going to focus on graduating this last year. If everything works out, maybe I will come back and run track. But I never went
Hmm.
back. Now that I think about it, I just never went
Hmm.
back. It was really, really tough though, because I was trying to constantly find myself outside of the sport. I missed it, but then I didn't miss it. And then I wanted to go
Hmm.
back, but then I didn't want to go back. So it was just a lot of back and forth trying to figure out what, okay, now new game plan because my last game plan didn't work out too well. So now I shifted all my focus towards school and work. I was working three jobs at the time, trying to pay for rent. And that was the first time inflation hit. And that was the first time I wanted to be an
Hmm.
adult. So those were just like really, really tricky times. Um, oh, pretty rough year, not gonna lie. Very, very rough. Not having that identity as an athlete anymore. And it was just so strange. Like, I was like, oh, I used to run track. I
Hmm.
did run track and stuff like that. Um, so it was a little bit rough, but I did kind of pour all of my energy into school, passing my exam, getting a job, all that good stuff.
Hmm. Okay. And
Mhm.
we're on like the same mental wavelength because that kind of touched on another thing, which is the
Yeah.
identity piece of letting that go and then trying to
hmm
find and explore and build a new identity. What was that process like for you and what helped you with that?
that is a good question. So at Texas Tech, I will say they actually did a very good job of
Hmm.
preparing us for life outside of athletics when it comes to jobs. When it comes to jobs, they're like, okay, let's think of ways that we can introduce ourselves like without our sport. So we went through like an entire program of them prepping us for that. But no one really prepares you for the emotional side of it. It's almost like it's the closest thing I could relate to that identity kind of being taken away is almost like heartbreak because it's like that was that
Hmm.
one thing that encompassed your entire life. So honestly, to this day, there are still moments where I'm just like, what, who am I like outside of
Hmm.
my athletic self? And during that time, I was also, again, in therapy and I was constantly asking those questions and trying to figure out things that I enjoyed doing for myself outside of my sport. I really wanted to
Hmm.
paint, so I got like some paint kits, or I really wanted to crochet, so I started doing stuff like that. I spent more time outdoors, going on walks, just enjoying fresh air, enjoying not that I think that was the first time I actually enjoyed not forcing myself to go and lift weights, forcing myself to go to the track and stuff. I have
Hmm.
an opportunity to. It's right there if I want to, but it's also okay if I wanted to take a break. So also enjoying those moments and recognizing that rest is productive. And
Hmm.
it took me a long, long time to recognize that, especially shifting out of athletics. So coping was a little bit hard because a lot of my friends, half of the people on my Instagram all running track, still some of them are still running track. So there are still moments where I'm just like, aw. But then the rest of the time I'm just like, okay, like I am able to recognize and identify that
Hmm.
I am more than an athlete. If you would have asked me that question maybe freshman year in high school, I probably would have been like, I'm just an athlete. That's the only thing that I am. But it really, 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 really took a lot of soul searching and me being vulnerable with myself and trying to push that notion that like it is okay to be something other than an athlete. Like the athletics is just a part of who I am. It's just a part of the sum. There's other parts of me as well that I can kind of tap into and figure out. Yeah, kind
I
of
love
long-winded,
hearing.
sorry.
No, it wasn't long with it at all. I love hearing. Sorry, oh, ADC moment. I love hearing how comfortable you are with that vulnerability piece of being able to explore and figure out who are you outside of the identity of a athlete. And I think one of the
Mhm.
things is that, and one of the reasons I love asking that question to people is to kind of echo the fact that like we can figure out who we are and then we can go back and be
Mhm.
like, let's look at this drawing board and let's, like a etch a sketch, let's shake it up a little bit and redraw some things here. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like we can continually reinvent ourselves and add different roles to our lives. And some are going to change and whatnot. And just kind of,
Mhm.
explore and just change it. Like it doesn't have to be set in stone. Like we can know who we
Mhm.
are like 95% and have 5% that we just want to figure things out and try things on. And so many people I know were afraid to do that. And it's like, it's okay. Like
Yeah.
I literally had a conversation with a client earlier this week of like, there's no like get out of this black and white thinking of like you're going to fail at trying to figure out who you are. It's like as
Mhm.
long as you're on the general path, the direction you want to go, you're good. Like you're not steering down a life of crime or anything like that. It's like go
Right.
find some things out. Like success is what you make of it. And if it's something that you
Mhm.
don't like in terms of like who you're becoming in some way, you can change it,
Mhm.
and that's perfectly fine. That doesn't mean that you failed. That means that it didn't work out, or you don't like it, and you're doing something different. It's unfair to
Mhm.
engage in that hindsight bias and be like, "Well, this didn't go the way that I planned, so that means that I failed." It's like, no, you tried something out. It was novel to you and you realize that's
Mhm.
not for you and you're doing something different. So I love just hearing how okay
Mhm.
you are with that vulnerability piece, because I think a lot of people do quite frankly struggle with just being vulnerable of exploring who they are as a person.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something that I'm hearing more often in like
Hmm.
the athletic standpoint, trying to be vulnerable in that area. And they have a tough time seeing past the failure.
Hmm.
Once we fail, it's like, okay, well, that's the end all be all. We catastrophize and then there's nothing else that follows that. So kind of like exploring those areas. Okay, if I do fail, that's a learning
Hmm.
opportunity. It's a moment to figure out and shift things around, kind of like what you were saying. It gives you an opportunity to figure something else out.
With that, you got your master's and
Mhm.
clearly it's the counseling field. What exactly is your master's in? Because there's so many different masters that can allow people to do
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a master's in education in clinical
Hmm.
mental health counseling.
Okay, okay. And so, can
Hmm.
you talk about what was it? Because I believe, if I remember correctly, like you were studying psychology at Illinois State and Texas Tech, correct?
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And so, oh, go ahead, go
Mhm.
ahead.
Oh, sorry, what were we saying?
So I was just gonna ask, like, what kind of made you say, "Hey, like, I want to come become a therapist and get involved with
Mhm.
sports psychology and performance enhancement?"
Yeah, so I love psychology since high school. I was taking those classes and I
Hmm.
loved learning about the brain, behavior, personalities, theories, all of that good stuff. But I wanted to figure out a way how I can do it with athletes. The sports psychology realm sounded like really cool and stuff, but I also liked the idea of sitting down with someone and picking
Hmm.
like at their brain. What made you think of this process like that? Or what caused you to behave in that way? What caused that reaction? Where did this
Hmm.
all stem from? So I had to talk with one of my learning specialists and kind of pick and probe her brain as well, because I wasn't really sure what other career fields were out there outside of a psychologist and sports psychologist. And then
Hmm.
she introduced me to the counseling realm. Like that's
Hmm.
essentially therapy, one-on-one conversations with individuals who could be struggling with mental health. And I, as in, again, being vulnerable with myself, I definitely struggled with my own mental health. And I made a vow to myself that I never want another athlete to feel the same way that I was feeling. So I really wanted to dive a little bit deeper and figure out why I was feeling the way that I was and how to prevent other athletes from feeling the same way. So that's when I really started dedicating all my time and energy into counseling and into mental health. And then again, pouring that into myself as well and doing some of that deep diving and discovery. So,
Okay. And then what did your, I guess, your program look like? Did they have sports psychology classes for you to take within it as well? The reason I'm asking this part because I get
hmm
asked this like when I went to the ASH conference, it was like, how do I
yeah,
do it? And I'm like, look,
yeah,
this don't worry about the CMPC thing. I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm like, if you want to do therapy and you want to work with student athletes, you need to get a degree that lets you get licensed, and you need to get education and training or some type of supervised experience working
yeah.
with this population, especially if you want to work with the elite levels. Like, you got to understand the cultural components and the historical components of sport to be able to do this field.
hmm
Like, wanting to just work with athletes because you like work with them is great and all. However, you can do harm if you don't understand the
Yep.
intersectionalities from a systemic level, a cultural level, and how they can
hmm
impact a student athlete. Because, like you mentioned, with transferring away from home, like that is such a hard thing for a lot of student athletes. And if people don't understand various factors, especially even just
hmm
culturally, of what it means for a child to go away from their family and be somewhere else, like a lot of things, a lot of distress can come up and really impact
hmm
their mental health. So yeah, just what did your
Definitely.
curriculum and whatnot look like?
Yeah, actually commenting on what you are saying real quick. I wish I knew all of this information when I was getting my degree, but obviously that was a couple years ago. There was still some conversation about how to get into the field with athletes without having that sport psychology like master's degree. So I agree. There are fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of individuals in this field who don't have that education and prior knowledge and what it takes to compete at this level, and then adding their own bias and adding their own judgment as well, which then takes away from the whole experience of mental health for these athletes, which then makes it super, super challenging. My first time going to the AFS conference was my senior, no, my last year of my master's program, and I had all the questions. No idea how to even get into the field, where to start, where to go, what I should do, because everybody was going after the same two jobs that were available. So that part was like extremely, extremely challenging. My program didn't have a single aspect to do with sports. So I had to go and see because I was looking, like you were saying, the CMPC route. So I did a little, and no one also tells you how expensive these things are. They're extremely expensive as a broke master's student with inflation. Um, and I took a 12-hour course with the mentor. Great experience. I learned so much. It was absolutely amazing. I do wish that my program kind of dibbled a little bit in athletics, but that's just kind of like how they were structured. They did all the basics, clinical work. We were K-CREPT accredited program, so they added like psychopharmacology classes. They added family and marriage counseling, crisis, all of that good stuff.
Okay. Okay. And so it
hmm
sounded like you went your own route to get that other piece, to get that supervision slash training experience around that, which I think is great. Cause I know, again, like I said, I'll get asked a lot, and it's,
Yeah.
I'm somewhat envious slash jealous of how more there are integrated programs available and whatnot, and then practicum
Mhm.
opportunities, because I went through it, y'all, to get to this point. Like, and like where I was getting advice from people who were like some of the top names in sports psychology. And they're like, look, you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do this. But as long as you do these things, you're good. But there
Right.
weren't that many integrated programs at that time. And athletics was
hmm
very much still closed off to mental health at that point
Yeah.
in time. It was like, maybe a couple of people who were in there, but a lot of schools are still very closed off. And so for
hmm
you, what is it like you mentioned that, you had saw someone when you were a student athlete, and now you're the person that student athletes come to see. And so just what is that like for
Hmm.
you? Yeah, just as an experience.
Yeah, it's a full circle moment. I feel extremely blessed to be able to provide services from a familiar face. Someone I I guess it would whoa. I guess what I'm saying is I'm glad that I can be give someone a familiar face to come and talk to. I wish I had someone that looked like me that I could come
Hmm.
and talk to and have these conversations. But I also wish that someone had the same athletic background, like someone knew personally what it felt like to be at a high level collegiate athlete, post professionally as
Hmm.
well. So being able to provide that space and that knowledge and that connection with them, it feels really good. And in the moment when we're having conversations, I'm like, I know what that feels like. I can relate.
Hmm.
And obviously I don't say that, but I'm just like, okay, wow. But it definitely does help build rapport and connections a little bit more. Definitely helps with building trust because they are able
Hmm.
to be a little bit more open and talk and know that I do have a little bit of knowledge and experience from being in that point as well. So
Hmm.
it's such a good feeling. And when I was with the Astros, that was also a good feeling too, being able not only to connect with former collegiate athletes, but athletes from different countries. There was a lot of
Hmm.
Dominican athletes, athletes from Venezuela. So being able to connect with them in Spanish and share that knowledge with them as well. It's very humbling, and I'm extremely blessed to be where I'm at, doing the job that I absolutely love, and knowing that I'm kind of sticking to that vow that I mentioned to you earlier, making sure that no
Hmm.
athlete feels the way that I felt when I was competing and stuff. So I'm doing what I love, and
Hmm.
I really can't complain. It's great.
So there's something you touched on, which I was in my mind. I was kind of laughing about. So because I know sometimes, especially at the higher levels of collegiate sports,
Hmm.
student athletes will kind of sometimes side eye you, be like, "Are you a NARP?" And it's like, "Or were you a NARP?" And
Hmm.
I'm like, "Look, that term was not around when I competed, but I know what it
Oh,
means." And so I'll give a little bit of context, and especially like
yeah.
with football players, I remember one time I was like, I was like, "Hey, do they make y'all do mat drills?" And they're like, "Yes." Like, oh my god, like, and they're like, "Okay, you
Hmm.
did that?" And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, I understand it to an extent, but just the pain of mat drills. And so anyone that's ever
Hmm.
done mat drills are probably laughing right now because they're like, "Yeah, like doing was it rolling on a mat and stuff like that? It's just ridiculous and whatnot." But it's like little things like that that get buy-in with them to
Hmm.
be like, "Oh, okay, like you have." And you can empathize in some way with what it is that we have to deal with in terms of like
Hmm.
workouts and trying to make sure you're eating enough, or maybe some people it's the other way around. Just so many things that they struggle with,
Hmm.
that it's like, okay, you have some insight, and then with that too, just having the training education to kind of piece together how all these things impact a person. Like overtraining is a thing, and I've had like
Hmm.
different people think that maybe it was something with their mental health, and it's like, no, like you're overreaching or you're overtrained. Like you stop
Hmm.
working out outside of your workouts when you're not supposed to be. Like you're doing too much.
Hmm.
But just those little
Hmm.
things. But you mentioned also the opportunity you have with the Astros. Can you talk a little bit about that component of it?
Yeah.
Was that were you working there, or was that an internship, or can you just say a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a paid apprenticeship. So
Hmm.
I got the job spring after my graduation. So
Hmm.
May 23, and then I got hired on. So I was assigned to go work with the AA team out in Corpus Christi. And it just felt like everything was falling into place for me at that time because it was exactly what I wanted to do. And I just cannot believe that I got that amazing
Hmm.
opportunity after graduating and stuff. So they saw something in me that I feel I had to do a little bit more searching for myself to figure that out too. But it was a really cool experience. So my full job title was mental health and performance coach. So I was assigned to go work with the athletes out in Corpus Christi. So I would provide anything from mental performance work to one-on-one sessions. So if there were some athletes that needed a little bit more conversational, then I would, pull them aside. We would talk for a little bit. Baseball's a little bit
Mhm.
challenging because there's not a lot of office spaces where we were at. So you just kind of you just got to find a little quiet spot that works out and stuff. But it was a really cool opportunity. I got to be in the dugout with them during the games. If they were having a little bit of hiccups or any like mental blocks, and I was able to provide any type of skill in the moment to kind of help them reset and then get back out on the field. So it was really, really cool opportunity, really, really cool job. So I was with them for a year and a half.
Mhm.
And I learned so much about baseball. I never thought I was going to love the sport, but being in it and actually seeing the technicality that it takes to hit a ball that's coming at you at 99 miles an hour, or same thing, the amount of technicality that it takes to throw a curveball and then down the middle and then a fastball. So
Mhm.
it's really, really cool. It was a really, really cool experience. I'm so thankful I got a chance to work with them.
Mhm. And I got a little excited because when you mentioned like being able to do service in Spanish, so I'm actually wearing my shirt if people can see it. I did my internship at the University of Texas at El Paso. I don't
Hmm.
speak Spanish, but a lot of a lot of the clinicians that work there are bilingual in Spanish, and they're able to
Hmm.
provide services in Spanish only to the students that want or need it, as well as
Hmm.
like I know some of my colleagues were able to do their supervision completely in Spanish. And so like that's a very from how they described it to me, because again I only speak English. I tried learning French and it did not go well for me. But they were like, it's such a different experience being able to do supervision fully in Spanish and a very enriching experience. And
Hmm.
they just found it to be very rewarding. So what was it like for you to be able to provide those services and not have the language barrier be there in the way that so many people who are, whether they're Spanish speaking or another language, they'll run into when seeking, whether it's performance enhancement or
Hmm.
therapy services, where it's like, okay, like I'm trying to find someone who can genuinely understand what I'm saying and just and be able to, whether they're switching back and forth or whatever it may be, but just be able to express themselves and be heard and get what they're needing. What is it like to be able to offer that service?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Honestly, I don't know what word I can use to describe it, but it just feels so, the feeling is just so, it's fulfilling. There we go. That's the word. I just feel like extremely fulfilled being able to give them a space where they can actually express themselves without having to pull out Google Translate. Oh, this is that word, this is this word, and stuff like that. It's really fulfilling knowing that I have that knowledge in that space and I can give that to them. I can give them a safe space. I can let them know that it's okay to seek these services like within this area. You don't have to go out into the community and constantly search for someone who might only know a lick of Spanish here and there. But knowing that you can come and have a conversation with me and it's understood and it's translated right back to you. And it just felt like extremely fulfilling. Definitely a lot to learn as well on my end because the baseball terminology in Spanish was definitely something that I was not familiar with. So actually having to read a little bit more on those terms and stuff. But the fact that they were extremely patient with me, I was patient with them. They wanted to pick up on a little bit of English. So we would do a little English here, a little Spanish there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only word I could really think of is like extremely fulfilling and like afterwards knowing that I helped them, it just like my heart was just so full because they're away from their families. They're away from
Mm-hmm.
the things that they know and the people that they talk to. So it just made me feel just so light and full knowing that they felt like they could trust me and have a conversation.
Okay. I was going to ask you, is there a word in Spanish as you were trying to think about it?
That's a good question. Oh, now you put me in the hot seat. I don't know.
Because I know when I would be working with clients and like some of them, they were like, oh, I'm fine to work with you. But it would come up where there would be like a phrase and they're like, there isn't uh, like the word to try to just say it in English, or like it loses so much of the context. I'm like, just say it in Spanish and I'll write it down to myself so I have it for the future and whatnot. But it was like nice for them just to be able to say it, and then we talk about
Yeah.
it, and then I could kind of parallel it with something that maybe I knew of just from just where I grew up in my own community in different ways. But I always encourage people, is
Mhm.
like, hey, just say it whatever way, and then I like, maybe I don't understand it. That's okay. It's what does it
Mhm.
mean to you to be able to express it in the way. So I just love when people express themselves in different ways. So, but if it comes up, feel free to share it. So many things I want to ask you about, from like the transfer portal to like current thoughts about mental health to conference realignment and all this stuff.
Ask them all.
Okay, so I guess, what do you think is the biggest challenge when it comes to mental health in college athletics?
Mm. I think accepting that there actually is an underlying problem. I definitely think a lot of athletes, oh, I'm just like feeling a little bit down, and then they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until there is nothing left, until they're literally empty, depleted because they didn't take care of what was actually the underlying reason for their sadness, or that could even like lead to physical injuries at the end, just because stress can kind of take over and stuff. So I think the biggest challenge is actually recognizing that there is a problem and it's okay to have a problem. It doesn't mean that you're going to get taken out of practice. It doesn't mean that people are going to look at you differently. It doesn't mean that your training is going to be the end all be all. If anything, recognition is what's going to give you the power to perform better than you have, because you're able to recognize that there is a problem and you're working towards addressing it and fixing it. So I do think that might, in my opinion, I do think that's probably the most challenging thing with mental health and collegiate athletes.
And then, what are your thoughts with the culture shift? If which it might look different where you're at compared to where other people are, but with
Mhm.
just the culture shift regarding mental health and performance enhancement, especially in the collegiate space. Because again, when
Mhm.
I started doing this, it wasn't like a very well known or well established things. Even
Mhm.
amongst like some of the elite schools that have very solid psychology programs, like
Mhm.
it's it's still really, really relatively new, but there is a changing landscape. Like there is more conversation and more buy-in, and so just what comes up for you with that, not only at the collegiate level but even professionally. I know with especially the Olympics, it's been a big thing as of late with them. A
Mhm.
lot of Olympic athletes talking about their mental health and the services that they've received and whatnot. And I know even the United States Olympic and Paralympic committee is they're then expanding more and more and more to really focus on not just performance but mental health as a whole and well-being as a whole. So just what comes up
Mhm.
for you with that changing landscape?
Well, one, it's super exciting that the stigma is starting to slowly be broken, but obviously work is not done. There are still a ton of areas that still don't believe the importance of mental health and mental performance. They just either would rather not talk about it, or they would just rather refer out. So obviously there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of stigma that is behind it, especially in athletics. And I notice it a little bit more being in the South and having a little bit of challenge accepting that there is help available. The idea, oh, a counselor, a therapist, a sports psychologist, like nothing's wrong with me, like I'm not sick. When essentially, yeah, you're not sick and that's okay. It's just a conversation. It's okay to talk to somebody. It's okay to converse and just kind of get your thoughts out of your own head. The other thing that I'm really hearing and seeing with such growth in mental health is that there's a lot of people who are trying to do our job that aren't licensed. Mental coaches, life coaches, like those are the ones that sometimes are a little bit more what is the word? Like people and some teams like the idea of hearing a life coach or a mental
Hmm.
coach. Oh, they know exactly what it takes. So sometimes people would rather hire someone that isn't licensed because the marketing, the glitz and the glam sound a little bit better. So there are a lot of pros and cons. It's super exciting seeing the growth of
Hmm.
mental health. Like you said, like the Olympics are, they brought in a lot of clinicians this year to the Paris Olympics, and then seeing them be there as needed. Or maybe some people were using them, and even some of these professional athletes speaking out on mental health is selfishly, it's very exciting because more people are starting to recognize that our job is important. Oh, that Olympic person used it. Maybe I should go
Hmm.
talk to them. So it feels good. Like the word is finally still, the word is getting out there, but obviously there's still some of the back end stuff where it's like
Hmm.
unlicensed individuals, and not knocking their jobs at all because a career is a career. And if you're doing what you love, that's great. But obviously, again, still a lot of work to be done, especially when it comes to breaking
Hmm.
that stigma, still having these big, important conversations. So,
All right. I'm gonna keep my comments about that part to myself so that I don't want people rage messaging me about it because that definitely is a thing. Like, there's a thing on the
mhm.
side of like clinicians that don't have the sports psych training and the people who aren't clinicians. And like one of the things I've had to highlight and that doesn't really get brought up is like, well, if you're doing some of these performance enhancement skills, it's kind of recognizing like you are inadvertently either doing therapy or providing psychoeducation for remuneration, which is actually against the law in most states to do. And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, you haven't looked at the licensing laws
Mm,
to know that. And so it's kind of like a thing where it's like, does a person have to be a clinician to provide, I think, different performance enhancement mental skills services? No, absolutely not. And I think
mm,
there is a space for that. It's some of the other ways they start to kind of go about it that can kind of start to be problematic. And with that too, when it comes to colleges and whatnot, it's like it's about liability and risk. Like I know I've had to tell someone, they were like, "Oh, something confidentiality." I had to stop and be like, "Don't ever say confidentiality again." I was like, "That's a legal term." I was like, "You can't.
mhm,
There, nothing you do is confidential. It's private, but it's not confidential. If you get subpoenaed, you got to give them whatever they're wanting." I was like, I only have to respond to a
mhm,
court order. I was like, because
mhm,
what my
mhm.
work is confidential by the law. And so, really just
Yeah.
expressing that difference to them. They're like, oh,
Mhm,
like I didn't know that. And I was like, no, like I know you didn't know. That's also why I'm telling you this, not to be an a-hole,
mhm.
just so that you can not get yourself in trouble for offering
Yeah.
something that these little things, they add up. And then if something happens and you go to court and let alone if the board gets involved for some reason, now you're in trouble and whatnot
Right.
because you didn't know all these little things were legal terms or a scope of practice that you were operating in. And
Mhm.
it's all on your marketing stuff. That's what they're going to pull up. And so,
Yeah.
what do you think? I don't know if there was something you were going to add to that, but if there is, by all means.
I was just gonna
Okay.
say, yeah, a lot of the times people don't realize there's a lot of legal issues that go behind
Mm-hmm.
what we do. And kind of to your point, there's a lot of research that needs to be done. Like there's a lot of laws
Mm-hmm.
and regulations that go on behind this. It's not just actually going out and actively I'm going to sit
Mm-hmm.
down. I'm going to talk to this person in a confidential space. Like you said, they were subpoenaed. That's going to be a whole nother issue and problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I do wish people would do a little bit more research and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And again, not knocking what they do. Everybody needs a career field and stuff, but the legal side of it can get extremely messy. That's
And
all.
then what do you think? I guess what are your thoughts about the transfer portal as well as just all this conference realignment that is still getting ready to happen? I hear a lot of different things from different people that I know in athletics and that I read. There's going to be some more stuff happening in the next 1 to 2 years with realignment. Just what comes up for you with that?
You said with realignment?
You have a conference realignment. There's going to be a lot more changes in the next two
Oh,
years, even amongst, I think, the Power Five.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I don't really know how to feel about this whole transfer
Hmm.
thing. Transferring because money is better over here, because I'm getting a car over here.
Hmm.
I feel like this is my own personal opinion, but I do feel like athletes aren't really playing to play the game, play the sport because it's fun. They're playing because it's giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I know that's only for some aspects of sports. Other sports aren't even getting a lot of
Hmm.
NIL money when it comes to transferring and stuff. I do think they made it a lot easier. When I was transferring, it was a little bit difficult and challenging. And now all you have to do is just put your name in a portal and everybody sees you. All the coaches
Hmm.
can find you super easily. When on my end, I think I was emailing some coaches still.
Hmm.
So I think they have made it pretty easier nowadays. But it makes me wonder if athletes are like transferring for the right reason
Hmm.
or is it for just money?
Hmm.
Um, but when it comes to like the realignment of conferences, I personally do not understand it because now I see some coastal schools in the West Coast having to come towards the Midwest or the South, and there's a lot of time change. There's going to be a lot of traveling differences. And I just remember how exhausted I was traveling from Illinois to compete in Cali and then Cali coming back and then
Hmm.
getting adjusted to the time change, the weather, the heat, all of that good stuff. So I can only imagine like how I'm just thinking, how are they going to do that? How are the athletes like physically going to feel competing from one time change with time zone to the next? They're probably gonna have to
Hmm.
put more money so they can stay longer in the hotel so their bodies can get a couple more days of adjustment. Um, I don't really understand it. It's still a
Hmm.
little confusing to me, something that I personally do need to read a little bit up on and try and figure out what the reasoning is, but
Hmm.
I think it's going to be really interesting. I do agree that there are some schools that definitely moved up to the right area or moved down. So I think it's going to be really cool to see, though.
Okay. And then last question, although
Mhm.
that's probably a lie. I'll probably have two more. See how long my battery lasts here on my camera. What you mentioned NIL. What do you think would have been different for you had NIL been a thing? Even though you haven't been out
Mm.
that long from competing collegiately, what would have been different with NIL, and how do you think that would have made your transition, impacted your transition to being a professional track and field athlete?
Oh, that's a good question. It's funny because NIL became a thing 2 weeks after I finished at nationals. So I missed it by 2 weeks. I was so hurt. I do think it would have given me an opportunity to kind
Hmm.
of branch out a little bit. So it's actually funny. I got invited to do a photo shoot for a local brand in Lubbock, no pay,
Hmm.
just for fun. Before NIL, got in trouble, couldn't practice, had to talk to uh,
Like
compliance about the
compliance.
whole
Hmm.
ordeal and stuff like that. Didn't get free clothes out of it. It was just a fun photo shoot. Um, Now with NIL, I probably would have been able to do it, but now that they're using my image, then I could add a price to it.
Hmm.
Or I definitely I definitely think it would have allowed me to accept a couple of more offers that I was getting like on Instagram. Hey, post this wearing our sunglasses, or hey, use this
Hmm.
when you're working out and stuff like that. So I think it would have given me a little bit more freedom in that sense. But if we were getting paid, I definitely do think that would have set me up financially a little bit better for
Hmm.
post collegiately entering my track field, but also could have given me a chance to maybe find a small local brand that would have wanted to sponsor me, help me out in that sense, pay me to wear their shoes, try it out, see if it's worth putting out in the market to other athletes in that sense. So I do kind of wish I had a chance at that just a little bit,
Mhm.
but I think it's cool that some of these athletes are getting that opportunity to finally make some money off of their name and their
Mhm.
pictures. Hmm.
Yeah, I really love it. I think for like, especially I think women's sports, because I think like you said, like there's so many ways where they can use all students can use their name, image, and likeness, to where that can open up a lot of more opportunities that then can make it more intriguing to pursue being a professional athlete. So like, especially I know like a
Hmm.
lot of the Olympic athletes, or was it they their income is basically at the poverty line, if not a little bit lower, because
Hmm.
it's like trying to train. They really can't support themselves because most jobs aren't going to be flexible for not only the training, but
Hmm.
the recovery that they need to do. So if they could have something that they're building up as they transition out, that can make a world of difference for them. And it's like, well, why can't I use my picture if I want to, like, or it's like it's me, like what do you mean? So I do think that's something that's
Hmm.
going to, I think, change girls and women's sports. I think we already kind of have seen it with the WNBA and women's college
Hmm.
basketball. I think softball and volleyball are another ones that we're starting to see this with, where now it's just going to get a lot more eyes and buy-in, and people are going to think, hey,
Hmm.
maybe I can do that too, and it's going to be more and more competition.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely love that there is just so many more eyes on women and watching them compete and stuff. Obviously, NIL compared to men's sports obviously still isn't equal, and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in that space. But I am so excited seeing all these women getting the credit and recognition that they deserve. So it's really cool watching the come up from that.
For the final question, fingers crossed about that.
Yeah.
There's looking back, what, if anything, would you have changed as one question that I could
Hmm.
ask? And then the other one is, what is probably the most important thing that you would tell a young person as they are deciding to compete in college and where to go to compete? Like, what are the things that you think it's important that they think about, that they ask, and part of
Hmm.
their, or and add into their decision making process, so that they can make the best decision for them
Hmm.
and their long time future, not only as an athlete, as a student, and just as a whole well rounded person. So I'll let you take whichever one you want, if not both.
Oh gosh, okay. First question, I if I could change one, right? Change one thing.
Yeah, like looking back, what's something that you would change in terms of like your athletic experience?
I think I would change. Ooh, that's a good question. I think I would change the time that I went to therapy a little bit later. I wish I moved that up a little bit. I wish I got the help probably my freshman year a little bit, but obviously I did not have that self-awareness yet that there was any problem. So I do kind of wish I had that a little bit earlier, just so then I could probably handle adverse situations a little bit better, handle my emotions and in that type of aspect. So that's kind of the one thing I wish I could change. Obviously, I wish I was a little bit faster too. Like I wish that aspect could have changed as well. But for the younger students who are looking to go to college, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And like
What do you think
advice
is
in that
something? Yeah, like what's like the things you think they should take in consideration when making that
sense.
decision, so that they can do what's ultimately in their best short, medium, and long term future?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I would say go where you're wanted, go where you're loved, and go where you're respected. Those are like the two real big things that I think are extremely important. I know all the glitz and the glam, the money, the gear, all of that stuff could be um kind of like blinding in a way to the reality of what might happen. I would also think about that sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side because of all the glitz and the glam and the media and the
Hmm.
productions and all of this stuff. Go where you know that you're going to be respected, valued, and wanted, but also go to a program where you see yourself flourishing and leaving it a better place than when you first got there, whether that's education, athletic wise. Um, yeah, make sure you find a place where you feel like you can make a mark, leave a legacy there. If you can see yourself doing that, then I do think you found the right place. But just beware of the glitz and the glam,
Hmm.
production media, all of that good stuff. Yeah, go where you're valued, go where you're loved, and make sure that this is a place where you can see yourself enjoying yourself and having fun. Being an athlete is supposed to be really fun, and if you find a team that brings that for you, then I think that's gonna make the college transition a little bit easier, a lot more fun, and it's going to help you enjoy your experience. So, also, don't rush into things. Think everything over, pros and cons list. I tell this with all my athletes too. Let's make a pros and cons list.
Well, Dejane, thank you. It means a lot to do this. I know we were working on it for a little bit. I had to get a new computer, y'all. My MacBook Pro that I had was from 2012, and it still works, but it was grinding hard. I was like, hey, you want me to do the internet and try to record at the same time? I ain't gonna make it. But I finally got a new one. So again, really appreciate you doing this. Again, this is something that I hope that people are able to watch and think about. Maybe it can help them as they make their decision if they're currently in school or even if they're out. I know some people who are still struggling with the transition out of sport, and I think it's helpful to know that they aren't alone. That other people experience in their own way, and just the different things that help them get through it. So again, big thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Jay. I'm so happy I got this experience. I'm so happy we finally got this scheduled. And for anybody watching, just know that you are loved, you are valuable, you are cared for, and you are unique and amazing in your own way. So